Hi, my name is Zoe. I'm the Tipsy Psychic. Happy card reading day. No joke, it is a real thing. It is card reading day today, and in celebration of card reading day, a real holiday, I am going to be talking about tarot cards, specifically tarot card patterns. Reading the patterns in a tarot spread is so important. If you want to go more into depth and really train your intuition, you're gonna want to learn how to read the patterns when you're giving a reading. This is often really overlooked when people give readings. We focus so much on the individual card and the deck and the layout that we don't actually focus on what the patterns in the cards in our spreads are telling us. And the patterns can actually change the entire fate of the tarot reading. So let's get started. There are 4 suits in an average Rider-Waite tarot deck. Most decks are based off of the Rider-Waite tarot deck, and it's a certain format. There are cups, swords, pentacles, wands or rods, and each of these suits are very important. Cups have to do with feelings, emotion, creativity, passion. Swords focus on conflict, painful truth, aggression, confrontation. Wands focus on career, building, creating, establishing. And pentacles are more about money, materialistic things, education, contracts. So when you're giving a reading, it's really important to look at the quantity of the suit that you have in your spread. For example, when you're giving a reading about love and family, and most of your cards are swords, then it's usually going to be about something more confrontational and conflicting, right? It changes the tone of the reading. If the reading has more cups in it and you're talking about finance, then it might indicate that this is really not about finance, that there's something emotional that is driving this reading. It's also important to look at what is not there. So say there are no cups in the reading and you're talking about a family. Well, that's not normal, right? Like, families are about love, but if there aren't any cups, and that could really signify a lack of that passion. So it's really about interpreting how many of those things are in there. So it's not just about looking at more, but it's also about looking at less. And this applies to other things that we're going to get into. Every suit has 10 number cards and then 4 court cards, which we'll get into in a second. I like to think of them as a timeline. I'm not going to get into depth about the meaning of the numbers, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. Whenever you see a card now with a number on it, I want you to think of the entire timeline and where that card fits in. So there are 4 aces, right? 1 for each suit. This is the Ace of Cups. Aces are the first on this timeline. So aces usually mean the beginning of something, the potential for something. So in this case, with cups, you put 2 and 2 together, the beginning of love, the beginning of creation. So what if there are 3 aces in a spread about career? What does that mean? It probably means that you're right in the beginning of it. Like, there's potential for something, potential for growth. It probably means that things haven't been explored yet. You know, they haven't unraveled yet. So knowing that the quantity of that number is very important. Let's get into some of the other numbers. Let's talk about number 2. So this is the 2 of Wands. 2 usually represents duality. Think of partnership, balance, something that must be faced. I like to think the 2 of Wands brings like a fork in the road, like there are 2 paths in order to move forward. But say you have the 2 of Cups. Well, that's more about partnership, right? Balance, So when you have a lot of these in your readings, then obviously it's going to be about balance. It's going to be about that partnership. You had a new beginning, the potential. Now you have to make a decision. Let's talk about 3. This is the 3 of Swords. 3 usually represents what happens after that decision or that union, that action, and that is the outcome. So if you have a lot of 3s, then you're going to be focusing more on the outcome of things. Let's talk about number 4. So number 4 is going to represent stability in a more realistic way, like financial stability. So after you had that outcome, now you have some kind of stability as a result. It's a reality that you have faced, and now this is the result of it. So often when you have a lot of 4s in your reading, that means that you've kind of reached a plateau. It's like, now what, you know? Let's talk about 5. Now 5 usually means a plot twist. And most of the suits aren't very positive with this. For example, the 5 of Cups, obviously shit's gonna go down. So if you have a lot of change, a lot of these messy cards, then you know that things are probably kind of unstable right now, right? They're constantly in flux. Let's talk about number 6. So number 6 is about the journey. All right, things were changing, things are in flux, but now what? One minute you feel like you were stabbed in the back, now you're kind of rolling out of the storm, you're rowing the boat out of the storm, right? So you're moving away from that conflict and that change and that instability, and you're headed somewhere. So it's like a motion card. So if you get a lot of these 6s, then you know that things are kind of progressing, right? You're on a journey. It's about a journey. Let's talk about 7. This is the 7 of Wands. 7 of Wands is about willpower. It's like being able to own your values, have self-control. When it comes to the Cups, it's about indulgence, right? Not having that self-control, feeling, letting loose. But when it comes to your career or moving forward in life, you're gonna wanna protect yourself and protect your values, and that's how I see this card. If you get a lot of these 8s in a reading, then you know that there's going to be progress, that things are moving forward, or that's kind of what it's about, right? So the 8 of Swords, for example, is about feeling trapped, feeling like you're not making any progress, right? Like you don't really know which way to go. The 9 is usually a pretty positive card. Obviously, it depends on the suit. Number 9 has to do with feeling fulfilled. So obviously this is the Pentacles one. It means things coming true. Now I want you to think of the 10. So this is a pretty brutal card, right? It looks really brutal. And it's about hitting rock bottom. It's like the end, right? Think of the completion of the story. And this is how this one ends. So if you have a lot of 10s, then you know that things are kind of complete. Let's not forget that there are other cards in the deck, and they're major arcana cards, and those are also numbered. And they're similar. They have a timeline. Chariot, right? So numbers play a very important role in tarot. So whenever I look at a spread and I have a lot of different numbers, I try to picture it in a timeline, and that really, really helps me interpret things about where someone's at that I'm reading. Don't forget about the absence of numbers too. When I was describing some of the cards, I mentioned some of them as being more negative or positive. Many of the swords are often associated with negativity, but obviously you have to read the whole thing to really figure it all out, right? Because that could just be something else. I like to say cards aren't good or bad, but cards like the Devil or the Tower are usually more associated with the negative. The more cards that you have that are associated with a negative in your spread also means something, right? It does make the reading more negative. For those of you who don't know, often in a reading, cards will turn up upside down, reversed. Different readers read reverse cards differently. Some prefer not to read them at all, and they just don't really use that in their readings. Others have a whole separate meaning for that card. It really depends on you and what you feel like doing. If you do happen to use reversals in your readings and interpret cards upside down that way, it's really important to look at how many of those are there in the reading. If all of the cards are upside down, then that could also mean something, right? Then I want to talk about court cards. In every suit, there are 4 court cards: the page, the knight, the king, and the queen. Traditionally, court cards represent people. So the more court cards you have in a spread, the more it might revolve around certain people in your life. Or if you don't have any court cards in your spread, then this is probably bigger than the people in your life. So it's up to you to interpret how you want to do that. Pages usually represent kids, young people. They can also represent news. Kind of think of like news from the olden days when a page went and had to carry a message, right? So the Page of Cups could either mean a very creative, passionate, loving child, or it could mean news about love. Maybe that's an invitation to a wedding. Maybe that's hearing about an engagement. It's really up to the reader to decide which one applies here. The Knight represents usually a young man, but obviously in this day and age it can mean a young woman as well. Knights can also mean events. It can mean a young man who is more materialistic, someone who is more educated, often someone who is more focused on the materialistic things in his life, right? Or it can mean an event with money, a divorce settlement, or an inheritance, right? And then we have the Queen. And the Queen is simple. It represents a woman, right? It can also represent like your feminine side if you're talking about you, but it often represents a woman. And when it comes to swords, it's all about confrontation, conflict. So maybe a woman who is more aggressive, more confrontational, a truth seeker, someone who doesn't take bullshit, you know what I mean? And then we have the King. The King usually represents a man in your life, or it could be the masculine side of you. The King of Wands, of course, usually represents a businessman, someone who is more organized, more career-oriented, more pragmatic. It's also very important to look at where these cards are located. It's important to learn the cards, but it's also an art form and to be able to see the patterns, and it just takes practice. If the same card keeps appearing in a reading over and over again, whenever you read that same person, that could also mean something. That is a pattern that needs to be looked at, and you need to also interpret what that means. Thank you so much for watching this video. Happy card reading day, y'all. Please subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you have any questions below. I am going to post this tarot deck below, and I'm going to post some other awesome tarot decks you can also look at if you're interested in, getting a new tarot deck or getting your first one. This is one of my favorite. Remember to let me know if you have any questions or thoughts in the comments section below. Subscribe to my channel. Bye. So we have the 9 of Pentacles, the 8 of Swords, and the 10 of Swords. Let's first look at this suit, right?